I have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're going to pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting, you wouldn't have lasted long.
Hello there.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
Hello and welcome to the Star Wars Station Communication Podcast. For those of you new to the program, my name is Carter. We wish you all a very merry, belated Christmas and a happy holidays. I really hope that all of your Star Wars dreams came true underneath the Christmas tree. I got some amazing Star Wars gifts. The newest Star Wars cookbook with this really cool Bantha Burgers grilling apron. Can't wait to be out there in the backyard grilling up some Bantha Burgers. I also got a Grogu Chia Pet and Star Wars Outer Rim board game. So all in all, a really successful Star Wars Christmas for me. I spent it with the in-laws, and they very clearly know me too well because I either got Star Wars gifts, cooking gifts, or a combination of the two. But with Christmas out of the way, we're all rolling into the new year, and I think 2024 is going to be a great year, not just in general, but for Star Wars, because there are a lot of really fun and exciting projects on the horizon that we are super excited for. I mean, Acolyte's coming out. We're going to be getting Skeleton Crew. We're going to be getting Bad Batch Season 3. We're going to be talking about that in the news segment at the end of the show on what we can expect and when we can expect some of these shows to be coming around. So stick around and hear that. But it's no surprise that 2024 is going to probably be a great Star Wars year because 2023 was a great Star Wars year. We got Bad Batch Season 2. We got Ahsoka. We got Jedi Survivor. And that's just to name a few. And so next week, we are going to be sitting down and bringing you our 2023 year in review. We have seen a ton of shows, we played a ton of games, and we have read a lot of books this year. And so we want to discuss some of our favorites. But speaking of books, we have a way to close out the year talking about another new book. The publishers over at Penguin Random House just never stop. They're always publishing something new because they have put some new entries into the Essential Legends collection. They came out on December 19th. We've already covered one of these books. It was on our last episode, Outbound Flight by Timothy Zahn. But today we're going to be covering the second half of that unofficial duology with Survivor's Quest, also by Timothy Zahn. We'd planned on covering this book on the 20th, but because of some unforeseen technical difficulties, we're delivering the breakdown to you guys today. And I say we because it's not just me covering this book today. I'm also joined by my longtime co-host, the vanquished Vagari himself, Colin Archer.
Man, Carter, what a holiday. I had a great time. Got everything I wanted and more. And to be able to spend time with family, being able to relax. It was a lot of fun. And I really am. We had a great 2023. I can't wait to talk about that. That's going to be a great episode. And like you said, really looking forward to 2024. But yeah, and this is the capstone. We're talking about this book, and I enjoyed it quite a lot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm excited to dive into it. You've continued, especially throughout this year. 2023 has been your year of Star Wars Legends reading. You've gotten to really dive into some of the old Star Wars Legends stuff, especially Timothy Zahn's bibliography. Yeah, I mean, you've read a bunch of Zahn stuff.
I think I'm in the category of what of his have I not read versus what have I read.
Right, exactly. And so I'm excited to talk about it. I enjoyed this book. I might not have enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed Outbound Flight, but I did enjoy it, and so we should just hop right in. I started talking about at the beginning in the intro about the unofficial duology, and that's because it kind of is. It was not, these two books weren't released as a duology. Go pick up Outbound Flight after you read Survivor's Quest. But Zahn wrote them where the two stories are obviously deeply intertwined. And it's kind of an original trilogy prequel kind of thing because Survivor's Quest came out first. It came out a year before Outbound Flight did.
Right. And it takes place, right after Phantom Menace?
Outbound Flight takes place.
Outbound Flight does. And then this book takes place right after...
It takes place 18 years after Return of the Jedi, so 13 years after Heir to the Empire.
Okay. Yeah. That's real precise on the time. Good. But man, it was a lot of fun seeing these two stories link up, right? And in small ways and in big ways. and exploring this, because Thrawn's in this book is long dead.
Yes.
But he still has a specter because there's these Chiss people that our main characters, Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade Skywalker, don't know about.
Right. And there is a duology of Thrawn books that happen between this one, between the Heir to the Empire trilogy and this one. And they also have a lot to do with Luke and Mara and all of our other original trilogy heroes grappling with Thrawn. And so Thrawn's specter is a really good way to put that because he's such a looming figure in everyone's lives, but especially Mara Jade's. And so this book, it kind of finally puts to rest anything to do with Thrawn. There's not much about Thrawn in the Legends timeline beyond this book. So we kind of get the final note on Mithra Nuruodo, as Mark Thompson's. He changed his pronunciation. So we listened to this book. We told everyone we listened to Outbound Flight. We also listened to this one. It was sent to us by our friends over at Penguin Random House, and we got to hear our good friend Mark Thompson again narrate another Star Wars book. He changed the way he pronounces Thrawn's name.
I didn't notice.
Yeah. Well, here this is straight out of Thrawn Alliances where Anakin butchers his name over and over. But I'm going to try to get the distinction. In previous iterations, he says Mithron Nuruodo. And in this one, he goes Mithron Nurudo.
Okay.
Yeah. Real subtle,
Very
real
subtle.
weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. They must have came to him and said, hey, you gotta say this differently now. Maybe they're gonna say it in Ahsoka season 2 on screen. They need it to line up.
That'd be cool to have more Chiss on the screen.
It would, really would. I'd love to see another Chiss show up in live action.
I mean, because he's from somewhere, and this book goes into why.
Yes,
and I'm sure there's bigger books that have the explicit details, but this is a real macro perspective, and because of his actions in Outbound Flight and some other things that took place, he was exiled from the Chiss ascendancy.
Yes, and so there was all of that leading up to his Imperial service, and that's where our heroes got to grapple with him. But now we're seeing the aftermath of some of Thrawn's decisions affecting the Chiss people in this book.
Yeah, delayed events taken all 50 years later, I think is what it was.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 50 years after Outbound Flight. You're exactly right. So to give everyone some context of where this is taking place, because we threw the years out. It's 18 years after Return of the Jedi, 50 years after Outbound Flight, 13 years after Heir to the Empire. But what that really means is that Luke Skywalker is married. He's married to Mara Jade Skywalker. He is the Grand Master of his own Jedi Order. His academy is established. His order exists. And Jason and Jaina, Han and Leia's children, are 13 at the time. And they're not featured in the story, but it's important to have the context of when this takes place.
Yeah, they're briefly mentioned.
Yes.
One sentence.
Exactly. And so if you were to compare this, Luke, this is like Luke time period-wise when we see him in the flashback in The Last Jedi. If in this alternate timeline, that's about where Luke is in age.
Right.
And so that's just important for everyone to keep in context. This is also the final full-length novel before the 19-book series of the New Jedi Order, where we see Luke's Jedi Order go toe-to-toe with the Yuuzhan Vong, and when the Yuuzhan Vong get introduced. So this is the last novel before that. Subsequently, that means this is the last novel that Chewbacca is alive for, and he's not even in it. I don't even think they say his name in it.
Yeah, he's not mentioned at all. Nor is Han, I don't think. And I don't even know if Leia was in it.
No, I don't think any of them are in it. Han and Leia get mentioned, but I don't think none of them are in it, which I thought at first was really interesting, and I had a little bit of trepidation, but I really came around to the fact that when I realized that this was a Mara Jade Luke Skywalker story, I was in. And honestly, more of a Mara Jade story than anything. I mean, most of all of the perspectives of the Jedi are coming from her.
So I'll give my quick take on what kind of story this is. This is like maybe Timothy Zahn Star Wars spin on a cruise ship murder mystery novel.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good way
to
put it.
Mara Jade Skywalker and Luke Skywalker are the cop duo as basically the straight men, figuring out what's happening, going on with this mystery. Mm-hmm. It's not expressly a murder mystery. We'll get into what it actually is. But, this is such a what is the novelist? That's the classic one, 10 Little Indians and all this stuff. And it's just, figure out who done it. There's a lot of who done it going on here. And it's such a classic story. And this is a spin on it. There's other ones. One of my really good episodes of the TV show Columbo is done on a cruise ship. That might have been the origin in it. But like murder mysteries, you can have just this random person from the outside world who is an actor. When you lock it into a starship or a cruise ship, it's only the people on the ship who are the suspects.
Right.
And so much of this is like, well, could it be this person? And could it be this person? And could it be that person? And it for me, it develops into a lot of fun. And because you're trying as the reader, well, what are the clues? You're putting on your little sleuth hat, your magnifying glass, and your deer hunter cap, trying to like, well, what are the clues that Timothy Zahn's given me to figure this thing out?
Right. I'd say two things. One, the cruise ship analogy is perfect because most of this story takes place in a part of Chiss space known as the Redoubt, which is a difficult to navigate section of Chiss space that they basically use as a natural fortress. And so you can't get in, you can't get out, except for in exactly the way the Chiss know how. And so everyone's trapped there. And so that's a great analogy. And then the other thing I'll say is if you haven't read these books, I would say that probably the better way to read them is Survivor's Quest, then Outbound Flight. Outbound Flight spoils some of the mystery a little bit, and I think that the mystery was so good and so compelling that you should really read this one first, because then you're not going to have any of the mystery spoiled. There's still mystery to be had in Survivor's Quest that Outbound Flight doesn't answer, but you're going to be scratching your head a lot more if you do it in the opposite order, which is a good thing. And that's how they were released. Survivor's Quest came out almost a whole year before Outbound Flight.
Yeah.
And so definitely worth looking at it that way. But this one opens with the perspective of the Imperial Remnant, commanded under Gilad Palian. He's now the head of the Remnant, and this is after the truce between the Remnant and the New Republic. So the Galactic Civil War in the Legends timeline was not from, 1 BBY to 5 ABY as we have it in canon. It was actually from 1 BBY all the way to 22 ABY. So it was a 23-year-long conflict. And it was finally settled with this truce right before this book. And so this is one of the first books that we get to see where the New Republic and the Imperial Remnant are not aggressors towards each other. They are not allies exactly, but they are coexisting governments in the galaxy.
Yeah, it was really kind of strange, because in canon, the Imperials are just crushed utterly, or so we're led to believe. Right. And this one, there's like Talon Cards. He's got his own Star Destroyer. That's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. It is cool. So like we said at the beginning, Mara and Luke are married by now. That's an important part of the book. And Mara is a good opposite to Luke in all of the stories that she's in with Luke, because she has street smarts and Luke does not.
That's
Luke
right.
is always the plucky farm boy from Tatooine, especially in the Legends continuity.
Yeah, he's the eternal optimist, almost, not literally, but he's always wanting to see the good side on everything.
Right.
And Mara Jade is like, she's getting what I don't want to say she's the first one to get her hands dirty. Luke will, obviously, but she's putting her brain she's putting her ear to the ground and can get the feel of things. She's
a true cynic. I mean, you said, like you said, Luke is always looking for the good in people. She's always really looking for the worst in people. So they make a good duo because they find both elements.
They're able to solve everything.
And
come to a really equitable solution.
They do. So we get into the first part of this book, and we're really just thrust into a conflict where Mara Jade is getting this message from the Chiss Ascendancy, originally from Talon Card, but it's by way of the Chiss Ascendancy, to go and help with this outbound flight thing. We learn why her and Luke are invited in the first place, why they're invited separately later on in the book. But the book opens with a cantina scene, a good cantina scene. I thought it was really well written.
Yeah, it was fun.
And everything about it was really fun. Mara Jade gets into a cool fight. Zahn employs droidicas once again in this fight, and I thought the guy must just love droidicas because he did it in Outbound Flight too.
Yeah, and Luke being able to confront what his dad did is such a cool perspective.
Yes,
and it first happens here, and it happens later too. It's really neat.
It is. It's super neat. I'll also say one thing that stuck out to me. dumbest phrase that I've read listened to in a long time in Star Wars was one of the characters goes, "in cash credits," which is just, I don't think that even makes sense. Why would they have that phrase?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I noticed right off the bat is, if you're listening to this, Mark Thompson does a wonderful Luke Skywalker impression.
Yeah, he does.
When we interviewed him, we talked about how good of a Han Solo impression he does, and I still think that's my favorite voice of his. He sounds just like Harrison Ford. But his Luke impression, especially a more wizened, aged Luke at this point, he sounds a lot like Luke.
All the characters in this one, the aliens, are really well. How they able to produce that? They because the aliens in this one have two mouths, and they have like two voice boxes, and they're able to layer that over each other, and it sounded really neat. I was really enraptured by how the aliens sounded in this.
I absolutely agree. I mean, everyone who listens to this podcast knows that we just think Mark's a treasure. Like, Star Wars audiobooks are better for him reading them. He just does a great job.
By a wide margin, too.
Absolutely. And so we keep pushing through the book, and we see when Luke and Mara know that they're headed to Outbound Flight, Mara is really against learning about the Jedi of old. And Luke is for it. Luke's like, we need to go because we need to learn more about the Jedi of the pre-Republic, or of the pre-Empire. We need to learn about the Jedi of the Old Republic. We need to know everything we possibly can about them. And that's been Luke's modus operandi in both Legends and canon. That's always what he's done. But Mara sets out at the very beginning, and she says, no, we don't need to learn about the Jedi of old, because that's how Palpatine came to power. And that's a really interesting aspect to her character, is you would think maybe Luke has that perspective because he fought Palpatine. He was against Palpatine. Obviously, Palpatine was Mara Jade's benefactor for such a long time, but she is so averse to it because she's aware of the atrocities. Well, they're both aware of the atrocities that Palpatine committed, but she is more intimately involved with the Empire and with Palpatine. And so I thought that was a really interesting perspective from her.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean, it's just a small inkling of the power of companionship and having your loved one alongside you to figure this stuff out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We continue. We get a lot of really cool details about the Ascendancy. Everybody knows that Timothy Zahn just has all of this stuff that he wants to talk about and write about the Chiss Ascendancy. And honestly, it's very Star Wars and it fits into the universe. But Zahn could have gone and written his own sci-fi series, changed some names, and then because the Chiss Ascendancy is so unique and it's so set apart from the rest of the galaxy that it really is just his playground. And so we see the description of Chiss ships. They're all sharp lines and angles, and just continuously we're getting details like this. Their uniforms, the way they act, the way they talk, and it's really clearly laid the foundation for the canon Ascendancy trilogy that we now have.
Yeah, it really is. My favorite part of this aspect is how the room can change decoration depending on who they're receiving as guests, just by a press of a button. And this was also an Outbound Flight, I think, and was in this one as well. And it's just fun to see the different aspects.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. At this point in the story, we also get our first big nod to Outbound Flight, because I have here in my notes, Ambassador Dean Ginsler with question marks and exclamation points, because I was super confused because they don't reveal to us, at least for I think a few paragraphs, that he is not actually an ambassador. He's masquerading as an ambassador, and he's a janitor in Outbound Flight, essentially. I mean, he works at the Jedi Temple. He fixes things at the Jedi Temple, and so to see that, I was really confused. I really liked his character. I mean, he was a small character in Outbound Flight. You don't like him in Outbound Flight because he's so abrasive.
No, he's a jerk to his sister.
Yes, but this book totally redeems him. I thought he was
wonderful. So he's met with trepidation by the Skywalkers, and because they know things, they're Jedi, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so and of course we as readers know things. Right, because Gendler, we're tipped off immediately, but they're even asking themselves, like, why was he transferred as a technician? Because in the book he intercepts a message intended for Skywalker to hopefully delay their arrival to this Outbound Flight discovery expedition, and that so he just wants unfettered access to it without some Jedi meddling, I guess. Well, that's an underlying theme is some people don't like Jedi, and the Chiss are really skeptical of their abilities and presence and stuff.
Well, and
like they're even tested at different moments.
Gensler is he obviously doesn't want Luke around either because he's masquerading as a New Republic official. Luke's met many New Republic officials. Luke doesn't catch on. Luke doesn't say, he's not a New Republic official, but he's met a lot of them that haven't.
Yeah, and so this is when stuff starts going sideways in the story, like they find him in a room that he's not supposed to be in later on, and it's given them a lot of, like the exclamation point from Metal Gear type thing.
Exactly.
A lot of trepidation and question marks. Yeah, like you said, question marks.
So we continue through the story. We see Mara Jade. It's so interesting to get to read these books because in the current canon and obviously in the films, Jedi do not marry each other. That was a George Lucas concept that he did not have established for the original trilogy. Didn't even have it established for The Phantom Menace. But by Attack of the Clones, he was like, yes, this is Jedi are celibate, or they're at least they can't marry. But Luke and Mara Jade's wedding was written before The Phantom Menace came out. And so that was just an established part of the story, and you couldn't really change it. And so this is a perspective we're not really likely to ever get again in canon. And so we get the pluses and minuses of having a Jedi husband. And it's that you're never truly alone and that they can sense your emotions. And so Mara Jade's lamenting this fact. And it's just, there's a lot of stuff in these legend stories that you're not going to be able to get other places because of the direction that the story's been taken in canon, that there's a lot of really neat stuff in this book. And that was one that immediately stuck out to me.
Yeah. And I hope we can get more into this on a future episode, right? I mean, because the relationship aspects in Star Wars, we can go down this massive rabbit hole. I mean, because even just in the brief minutes that's in the first of this book, you can see what the capabilities are, what the pitfalls are, what the positives are. And then from a more practical perspective, people love relationships. We get so much talk about Kylo and Rey and this and that. And there's stuff being left on the table here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's just a fun topic.
It is. It absolutely is.
At the very least.
So another thing that I noticed about this is just a syndrome of any Star Wars after the original trilogy. It's going to be this way forever. It's this way in Legends. It's this way in canon. Not even actually complaining about it, but it's has to be mentioned, is that Imperial Stormtroopers are kicking around 20 years after the events of the original trilogy. The Empire of the Hand, as it's called, led by Baron Fell, uses Imperial Stormtroopers, and his justification is very clear. It's not a bad justification. But in reality, the reason that Imperial Stormtroopers are still around at this point, and the reason that Imperial Stormtroopers in the Legends continuity are around in 100 years after, or the reason that the First Order in the movies looked identical to the Empire, they just changed, the colors on the ships, or they just changed the armor a little bit, is because people want to be able to sell Star Wars to a general audience. And the way you sell Star Wars to a general audience is Imperial iconography. Really, all of the original trilogy iconography, but the Empire just had so many iconic vehicles and armors and looks. And when people come to Star Wars, they want to see that. They want that familiarity. And so it's, to me, goofy that we've got an identical thing 20 years later when in real life technology advances. But I'm not complaining about it because it makes sense. And why would I not want stormtroopers in Star Wars?
I thought they were just a vehicle to have faceless bullet catchers.
Yeah, they are, but you could have faceless bullet catchers in other armor or that look differently. It really, and they
It's better to know to go with the faceless bullet catcher than the one you don't.
Sure. The other thing, we get some stormtroopers talking in this one. We get a few different stormtrooper dialogues. They've all got thick country accents, and I'm really curious why Mark chose that. Yeah. If that was some direction or what. So we keep moving on. We get to learn about Jack Fell and the Fell family. Soontir Fell, a pilot from the Empire, and now they are leading this Empire of the Hand. And so they're part of the spiritual succession of the Empire. And they're a wonderful addition to canon. They're something I'd love to show up in... they're wonderful additions to Legends, And I'd love to see them show up in canon. In Play a Bigger Role, Soontir Fel is in canon, but he's small. I think he's just name-dropped a couple times. But they're so intertwined with Jaina Solo and with the continuing timeline through the Yuzan Vong and Legends that I just don't know if we're ever going to get them back.
Yeah, again, at this point, it could be a missed opportunity. Maybe we'll find out in Ahsoka Season 2.
Yeah, maybe, hopefully. So we also see, this book helps us see Mara Jade really grapple with her Imperial past in an interesting way, because the Empire of the Hand is a benevolent group, pretty much. I mean, they still do some bad-ish things, but they're not the Empire. They're just not the Empire under Palpatine. And Mara Jade sees this, and she sees the Order. She sees troopers not questioning things. She sees not having this language barrier or this cultural barrier between different alien species. And so she has a little bit of subconscious longing for the Empire. And her character has to wrestle with this the whole time. Luke has to wrestle with this the whole time. He's mildly disturbed, not in a way where he's like freaked out real bad, but he's like, why are you having these feelings? Do we need to talk about this? Blah, blah, blah. Luke's also like her psychiatrist in this entire book. And I think just in her whole life.
As generally your partners are.
Sure, exactly.
The way I put this is, if you were a record and this needle's been running through your groove, and now you got a different needle running through your groove, you're going to be the one that's been running through you for a long time is going to be the one that you like the most.
Right.
Does that make sense? It's kind of butchered and hackneyed, but so yeah, I think that happens in real life. Another thing I want to add on to that, and something that we saw in Mandalorian Season 3 and Ahsoka Season 2, was that the New Republic, and maybe in this book, I don't know, this book is contrast to that, is when a foe is conquered, you just don't send the soldiers home.
Right.
And because we can see in real life and in fiction that when these guys are just set to pasture, they basically have to be reprogrammed. And the New Republic is doing a poor job of that in canon. Mm-hmm. And it looks to me like a better job of that, because these guys are still allowed to kick around and do stuff, but they have leaders who are not Palpatine and
right.
have for lack of a better term, reprogrammed them from being murderous thugs into enforcers of their territory, I guess.
Right.
What are they doing?
They have a little section of space that they got out of the truce, and they're the government in that space. It's so interesting to talk about this. We talk about canon most of the time, obviously, because that's what's being published, that's what's being put out more. And when we talked about Outbound Flight, we spent a lot of time this is exactly how this could fit into canon, because it's not hard, because it's not the canon before the original trilogy is not that different from the legends before the original trilogy. But the legends after the original trilogy are very divergent from the canon timeline, and they only get more divergent the farther down the timeline you get. And so these kinds of conversations about, the Empire's still around. This war lasted 22 years. This blah, blah, blah. We keep seeing this pop up, and you just have to be in the headspace that we're going to be talking about this completely different timeline here now. Because this is just essentially an alternate timeline. It is an alternate timeline.
Not a multiverse.
Not a multiverse, thank God. Never multiverse Star Wars.
Yeah, there's not going to be some bubble with Luke and Mara Jade standing in it.
Right.
Please.
Please. So this story also has a little bit of a survivor's guilt undertone, especially in chapter 7 they focus on this. And I love survivor's guilt stories. I gotta take a second to say I saw Godzilla -1 2 weeks ago. That is an amazing movie, and it's all about the survivor's guilt of a Japanese kamikaze pilot. And so I was really thinking about that. And they dive into Mara's survivor's guilt for surviving the Empire. She looks at Palpatine died, Vader died, Thrawn died. She was also committing atrocities. She was just as bad as these people. She was the Emperor's hand, but somehow she survived. For whatever reason, the Force let her, come away unscathed. And now she's, married to a Jedi Grand Master. She's high up in the New Republic government. She is just, in general, has a really good life. And she's kind of grappling with that. She's like, why did I survive? Why did I get to this point? Did I even deserve this? And I thought that was something. When we get Mara's character at the end of the Heir to the Empire trilogy, this is the natural trajectory, and I'm really happy that Zahn decided to explore this aspect of her character.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, it was super good. I'll also say there's a line in this. There's a couple choppy lines in here. Like, I think Zahn's a great author. I already judged the cash credits line. They say the operational manual is gone for this spaceship. It's not a 2007 Kia Sportage. It's not, oh, dang, we lost the one book that exists out of my car. It is a spaceship. There is not, I mean, look, there can be an operational manual. Why on earth would that not just be accessible on a datapad? I thought that was goofy. There's just a couple things that must be established like that I think maybe should have been worded a little better.
And they were able to copy and transmit the Death Star plans, right?
Yeah, exactly. 20 years before this.
I think those are bigger than 6 dreadnoughts.
So we keep moving through this story, and we learn about Dean Gensler is a liar, and he's not actually an ambassador. And we hear about him speak about his sister Lorana, who shows up in the Outbound Flight books. And it was just all of their story. I was really invested in his story, and I think he only shows up in these 2 books. And I really, really enjoyed the way that Zahn used this character.
Yeah, he was insightful. Again, this is the brother-sister relationship. Lorana was his older sister, if you remember from the last book. And like, he wasn't even born when she became a Jedi. That was another little interesting topic, is how people became Jedis. People took their kids to the temple, or I guess to a recruiting station, and had them tested. We had a fun discussion about that in the last podcast. But his parents doted over Lorana because she was selected. And so he's basically harbored a bunch of animus towards her his whole life.
Right.
He has. And it's very sad.
It is sad. And we get into that a lot more, and he describes that in detail, the way his parents treated him and the way he felt growing up, having a sister that was a Jedi. And that's got to be so tough because they're not even around. It's not like you're getting beat in a foot race or the spelling bee by your sibling. They're not even there. And the parents are just assuming a bunch of things about her and assuming the goodness in her heart or whatever, which she is. She's a good person, but it still stinks that his parents are assuming that way.
Yeah, and it speaks to what happens in real life. I wonder what Timothy Zahn's real life experience with this is, because it's very insightful. I've never experienced it. I've read a lot about it, but there are siblings who have faced where a parent favors one child over another, and the child who isn't favored, it colors their life, their whole life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the parents probably aren't even aware this is occurring. So
right.
This is a thing that this is why you read books, to learn about stuff like this. And this is a very compelling case of it happening in Star Wars.
Right. Use Star Wars to talk about the real world, because it's always better that way. We continue. We get more Mara. A lot of this book is just spent with Mara talking about and thinking about the good aspects of the Empire and how she wishes they were still around, because she's thinking about how the bureaucracy of the Empire could have been used for good, because she just continues to see the Empire of the Hand outperforming the New Republic in distinct ways. And how what would happen if there were a well-ordered empire that had people's interests in mind.
And Phil have a long discussion about this. And this one's interesting too, because again, this is a real-world topic. You go down to your city council and want to pull a building permit. It's easy for us, but in other parts of the world, it's a nightmare.
Right.
And so if I were in charge, type thing, oh, but you're an evil fascist, so sorry, you can't be.
Right.
I don't know. It's that spectrum of swords and plowshares, right?
Right. So we also continue through the story, and we learn, and the characters learn, that there are survivors of the Outbound Flight disaster, that they had no idea existed. They didn't know that there were survivors. And so this starts to set up, this was where the book really takes off, is all of these survivors' perspectives about the Jedi, all of these survivors' perspectives about the Republic. they've been isolated from the galaxy. They have no idea what the Empire is. They don't know about the New Republic, and they harbor a lot of resentment and hatred towards the Chiss and towards the Jedi and towards the Vagari, and
The
that's
Republic,
everyone involved in this story.
Yeah, and so they're just this unknown factor. I mean, because this is what makes you keep turning the pages in this book for me, is like, what are our characters going to do when they find it? What are they going to be like? What kind of perils are our characters going to face? And that's why you read the book. That's why I kept listening to this, is because what's the answer?
Right, exactly. What is the answer? As we continue through the story, we see, finally, this was what I was waiting for, was how is Luke going to wrestle with what Sabaoth did here? Because until I read Outbound Flight, I didn't realize that not just clone Sabaoth, but regular Sabaoth sucked. He was just an awful guy. And so when Luke sees that Sabaoth locked people away on Outbound Flight and he learns this, he's like, what were the Jedi of that day like? And that sucks that he's seeing this and he's like, thinking, Sabaoth locked these away, must have had a good reason. And he didn't, because he's just a crappy guy, and he fell to the dark side. But they don't know that. They have no idea that happened. And, the other thing that we keep exploring throughout this, and we keep talking about, is Mara with the Empire. I had something finally that I thought of that I wanted to bring up here. Do you think that Mara Jade's tie and all of these fond memories and everything she's experiencing could still be a phantom tie to Palpatine, like was explored in the Heir to the Empire trilogy, where that was a very direct phantom tie to Palpatine, where he was saying, kill Luke Skywalker, kill Luke Skywalker. But could this still even be residuals of that effect?
I didn't get that from the book, but speculation, maybe. I'd say not, though. I mean, I think it's just, like I said, she spent so much time in familiar surroundings, that doing all this, it's just an overlapping of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. I just wanted to put that thought out there. Wonder what people might think about that. We continue to go on. The survivors hate the Jedi, but they also hate Lorana Gensler, who was a Jedi. They think she abandoned them in their time of need, even though in Outbound Flight, her and Thrawn's brother, Thras, were the ones who ensured that those people would survive.
Right.
They
gave
landed
their lives
the ship
to
on
do it.
their side to crash it. And so it was very sad to me, because I really liked and connected with the character of Lorana Gensler just from that one book. And so,
well, I mean, she was the embodiment of what a true Jedi was, in contrast to Sabaoth. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, giving her life to save others.
Right, and she was showing sure of herself throughout that whole book, and finally sacrificing herself at the end, she felt like she had this purpose, which was very important. Also from Outbound Flight, the Vagari show back up. Didn't see this twist coming at all. This one came out of nowhere for me.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of obvious.
You thought it was obvious?
Yeah.
I didn't. I was like, what? It totally got me off guard. The
don't-
Jaroons, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a story wasn't plausible. I mean,
you thought it was I knew there was something up with these guys. I did not be like Vagari.
Oh yeah, sorry, I pegged it. No, their MO, they show up and they're like, we want to give thanks to Outbound Flight because they helped liberate us from the Vagari. And I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. And like, if I were in Formby's place, right, I'd be like, well, send a couple of your reps aboard, and I guess,
which is what they did. They sent like 5 guys.
Well, supposedly.
Yeah, well, that was, yes, under the ruse that they sent like 5 guys.
I don't know. I wouldn't have let him have a ship aboard. This is dumb. I'm not going to armchair quarterback a book. Whatever. I had alarm bells. It didn't smell right. Didn't pass the smell test to me. So
the Jaroons turn out to be the Vagari. And this is when everything hits the fan. I mean, this is just when everything goes wrong. The Vagari have captured Outbound Flight. They're trying to get their own frigate. They want revenge against the entire Chiss Ascendancy. Which, in their position,
it's understandable.
Are justified. They were terrible. I mean, like, we don't like them as readers, but they obviously, if you're a Vagari, you're like, yeah, we got to get this revenge.
Yeah, here's our
here.
chance.
And so it's a good story, and this is where everything really kicks off. But we also get a lot of struggle with, right before the Vagari reveal and immediately after, still a lot of struggle with the survivors. The survivors trap Luke and Mara in a turbo lift. We learn that the survivors have been quarantining and basically exiling Force sensitives from their ranks, which there's a decent amount of because it's a bunch of interbreeding for families that had already had Force sensitivity. Right. And then at one point, you get a very heated argument about how dare you disobey the law, talking about someone not giving up their child who is Force sensitive to be quarantined and, I guess starved to death. I mean, I don't really know the process that those people were going through.
Yeah, it wasn't clear at all.
It wasn't, but dead. I mean, we know they die. And so these people have the law as their god. And this is it's really a Lord of the Flies kind of situation where they didn't all cannibalize each other down to one, but you see them kind of regress to a point where they need to survive. They have basic functions. They've created an education system. They have a medical system, yada, yada, yada. But they've also established this law that they're just referring to as the law. You dare disobey the law. Like it is a, living thing that the law exists outside of people's own thoughts.
Yeah. And in my opinion, these situations arise out of, in normal society, if you got thieves living among you, it's a big deal, but it's also not at the same time. They can't be exiled. They can't be executed. That's too harsh, right? And there's mechanisms to rehabilitate these people. Mm-hmm. And this is true of all crimes, murderers and all the gross things you can think of.
Right.
In a situation where you need the genetic diversity, you can't just chunk somebody out who's a thief, right? At least I hope not, because eventually, because we're humans, we're going to make mistakes.
Right.
Even then, we're talking about a theft situation. Think of how many faux pas situations turn into big things because of this opposing values, mm-hmm. and that were just on their base level mistakes over something silly.
Right.
So you have to have these hard and in these close-knit societies, I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but if these evolutions of the law being your God, it become such a big deal because, a thief to us is unfortunately, I kind of wish it were different personally, but a thief to us is a bump in the road. A thief to these people is a life-changing,
right,
harrowing change in stuff. Because a person is taking more than what their allotment is. That means somebody is going with less. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that can be devastating to a silo society like this.
Yeah, exactly. Less in this situation is devastating. You're absolutely right. You have, and they're practicing small-scale eugenics is what's going on here. They're saying and no Jedi kids.
Yeah, and from their warped perspective, unfortunately, that's what they think is going to have them survive. Mm. And
it's not like it's some up for debate topic. Like they all agree, and you have multiple characters in the book that are crazy to not crazy that are saying get rid of this Jedi kid, and that's because of their perspective on what happened. You had Sabaoth treat them like crap on the voyage. Then they think that Sabaoth's the reason they crashed. Well, he is the reason they crashed. And
all the
they
Jedi
think
took their jobs,
abandoned them. Exactly. And then you have Mara Jade come in, who is this boisterous figure. She can be a little bossy at times, and she starts bossing them around. And they're like, just like the old Jedi.
Yeah. Yep.
So, I also really liked in parts of this book as you've already said, the dynamic between Fel and Mara. They grow a friendship pretty quickly. And so at one point, Mara says, not if you have a lightsaber, referring to how easy it is to do things. And Fel says, I'll make a note to issue them to the troopers. And I only put that in here because the irony is eventually that there is the Fel-led Empire does have its own Jedi Order with white lightsaber wielding troopers.
Yeah, that's a cool concept.
It is. It's a super cool concept. Jedi for the Empire is really neat. It's a neat concept for sure. We learn that the Chiss are kind of idiots also in this book. That as a society, in my opinion, these guys are dumb because every single book about the Chiss, the problem is caused by them and by their military doctrine. Every single book is whatever the problem is. At the end of the book, you learn, well, this could have been avoided if the Chiss just did preemptive strikes every time. And so eventually you're just like, man, you keep having problems about the preemptive strike thing. I get it. It's cultural. There is a real world debate to be had about preemptive strikes, but these people need to get it through their heads that they are the problem.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the Vigari, because these are overt bad actors.
They've been
with
destroying...
completely irredeemable qualities.
Exactly.
Right? There's only one solution here.
Yeah, exactly. It's really black and white.
And this isn't a debate about. It's an undebatable thing. It's like I don't like the way this person. It's nothing like that. There's not some base quality of like I don't like the way this person looks. I don't like the way this person acts. It's these people put human shields on their ships,
right?
In plastic bubbles. These people. In this book, it was a really cool mechanic. They had these wolf pelts as decorations for their ceremonial outfits. Well, it turns out they were in hibernation, and they used them as weapons afterwards.
Yes,
it was very cool plot
they were
device.
Cool. And I thought really what was cool about these animals too was Zahn spent a few sentences describing them and how they have this nervous system that's distributed throughout their body. You can't just cut the head off. It's going to keep coming. You can't just cut the heart out. You can't just shoot them in the heart, whatever. They said the only way to defeat these things is essentially chopping them into little pieces.
Right.
And that's always cool. I'm trying to think of what that is the case from in so many sci-fi, but it is in a lot of sci-fi, but I'm drawing a blank right now, but it's a cool concept.
Yep.
Certainly. So we then, as the Vigari are revealed to be the threat, as the Vigari are revealed to be a big threat, I mean, it goes from 5 guys to 300, almost with a snap of a finger. We see the survivors and the Remnant and the Chiss and the Jedi and the Republic all have to band together. We see everybody's talents come to the forefront, and what they start doing is the Vigari escape to go to Chiss space, and we got to figure out a way to get our heroes off the ship.
Yeah, they still wanted the dreadnoughts. That's almost functional.
Exactly. We got to find a way to get our heroes off the ship. And we get Mara Jade and Luke Skywalker
this is so cool.
in a Delta 12 Sky Sprite, which is like a Delta 7 Aether Sprite, but a 2-person one. And that was awesome. I really like, and I hope we get more of this in canon, I like every time it shows up in Legends when the new Jedi use old Jedi technology. Just imagining Luke Skywalker in a Jedi starfighter from the Old Republic is such an awesome visual. I was very, very happy for it.
And if you want more of stories like this, tune into our RPG.
Yeah, that's absolutely
and
true.
You can
Tune
find
into our
very similar akin stories. No Jedi involved, but some Jedi artifacts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun so far. It's been, after reading this, it's like we read this and then did some of our RPG, but I promise we didn't.
Yeah, this whole cool concept was cool. It wasn't something I was expecting in this because we read again Outbound Flight first. And this Delta 12 Aether Sprite was intended for Luke and Obi-Wan to...
Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Anakin and Obi-Wan. Sorry, it's easy to get them confused, right? In some aspects. To depart from the outbound flight before it left the galaxy and was never used. Palpatine plucked them off of there for a different reason. And it is used once more. And it was funny. The survivors, they're like, oh yeah, it was here. It wasn't on the manifest. We don't even know what's here. I guess you could take it. We don't have any use for it. It's like, wait a minute. You guys could have used this to escape? Send somebody out?
Well, they said they disabled the hyperdrive because the readout is unnavigable, and they didn't want one of the Force sensitives to be able to do it and then just leave. And then just leave them all there, which is just...
And Gensler was able to fix it because he's a hyperdrive tech.
Which, if you were nice to the Force-sensitive people and did not quarantine them, you could have had one escape and bring help. Like, it wasn't... Yeah. This was not a well-thought-out plan.
Yep.
It's the only thing on board that can fly and has a hyperdrive. At least try. I mean, having it with a disabled hyperdrive on board is the same as having it blown up in space.
Yeah.
So one guy just needs to step up and say, all right, I'll do it. I'm going to try to get us out of here. But whatever. So, as we said, they take the Delta 12 and they fly back to Chiss space to catch up with the Vigari. And they see that the Vigari's colony ship is a starfighter carrier that is just whooping the chiss.
Our heroes are able to overcome the carrier, but the Volgari get away in a dreadnought. And so it's up to Luke and Mara on this Delta 12 to basically stop the whole thing. And they're making this debate on, hey, should we get away and talk about this and get the survivors picked up and let everybody know, or should we have the power to pursue and stop this dreadnought? So this is the climax of the book, and it's really cool because, it's the culmination, this quintessential fight. It reminds me of so many like old action movies. Mara and Luke show up on this dreadnought. Like before it got away, Luke was able to throw his lightsaber in there and cut a hole in it. And so they get on there, they fight just swaths and swaths of enemies. And the climax of the fight is the main Volgari bad guy has a gas that he, like if nobody can have this, then, or if I can't have this, then nobody will. He has this poison gas. And between Luke and Mara, she's able to like vent the atmosphere out and kills the guy. Luke chops the dispenser up with a lightsaber, and it covers him in a cloud and kills the bad guy, and the gas is sucked out, leaving our heroes.
Very action movie.
Yeah. The whole sequence.
It's like the guy falling out the back of the window.
It reminds me of like Commando movie or something. Because they're suited and booted. They got their tools. They got their this and that. And they get on there and just kick total butt, dismantle. And they fight the droideka at the end. It circles back to the very beginning of the book, right? The whole circle back thing is such an amazing story plot device. And the droideka whoops their butts. They had to, but they figure out that it's just a droid and only works off basic programming. And they leave Ginsler's lightsaber where it stops. And so it stops to uncool its guns and all this stuff. And Luke's able to turn the lightsaber on, and it blows up the droideka.
Right. And I was really happy that they were able to use Lorana's lightsaber in that way because of the foreshadowing in the book where Luke is like, when they discover that that's Lorana's lightsaber and that Dean Ginsler discovers she passed away, when Luke offers it to him, he says, no, you may need it. And then obviously it comes up again, which that was a good MacGuffin. I was very happy because, again, Lorana Ginsler was such a compelling character from Outbound Flight. So I was happy to see that continue.
And so the end of the book ends as you think it would. There's a reconciling with Luke and Mara and Dean Ginsler. And they're like, tells them, oh, we found her lightsaber, but it broke in trying to do all this. Fel goes about his way. Survivors, they don't want to go back to the Republic. The Chiss doesn't want anything to do with them. So they're basically haggling for the Chiss to give them a ship. And I think they're figuring that out.
Well, and then they eventually go back with the Empire of the Hand. And so I thought that the Empire of the Hand taking them was great because if you're talking about successors to the Republic, they're a more direct successor to the Republic. The Empire, regardless if it was evil or not, was the successor to the Republic. The New Republic is a different thing. They overthrew the Empire.
And they just didn't want anything to do with anything that had Republic in their name. They hated that bureaucracy. So definitely the Empire is going to give them more of what they need. That was what Sabaoth was going to give them, but they didn't know that at the time. Sabaoth is kind of an oppressor.
Right. And then we also have, at the very end of this, I thought, really interesting dialogue. This goes back to the Spectre of Thrawn. And it's worth talking about only because Thrawn has got such a reputation in and out of universe, right? Like, people love Thrawn stories. He's been around a long time. He's the biggest EU character ever. He's the biggest character to have not shown up in a movie or TV show, to not have first shown up in a movie or a TV show. And so when we see the end of this book, Mara Jade is grappling with the fact that this may have been a setup by Thrawn, even though he's long dead. And they killed his clone on Nerowan in the duology, which, again, we didn't read the duology. I really think that these books could be better enjoyed if you had read that duology.
Right.
But she is just Thrawn Spectre, and his gravitas and his brilliance continue to haunt everyone he comes into contact with. And he leaves this long legacy in Legends. He's leaving this long legacy in canon. It is just a really, really interesting study of how this character went from just a guy in a book to now being this huge, really well-received Star Wars villain.
Yeah, and he's a monolith when you get right down to it. And the tendrils are everywhere.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, very enthralling too. Another part about the end of this book is basically Mara, through her force of will, is able to pry out of everybody what their true intentions were. Like Formby, he was the main Chiss guy that was interacted with in the book. He knew the aliens,
the Jaroons
he
were the Vagari.
knew the Jaroons were Vagari the whole time.
I know. This was... The Chiss suck. They're just like... And he was like, well, it was so we could get around the preemptive strike. We needed them to attack us. This is so dumb.
Yeah.
Your society must change.
Yep.
Adapt to survive.
And so the Vagari were up to no good the whole time. And Dean Ginsler, he, had all this subterfuge involved. He had good intentions, but going about it the wrong way, or I don't know. But the only true... I think even Fell and his cohort were not 100. They weren't overtly bad characters, like up to nefarious stuff, but they were scheming at the same time on their own stuff too.
Right.
And,
They were.
And so the only true-hearted characters were Skywalker and Mara Jade.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. As is often the case
As
in
is
these
often
stories.
the case.
But that's our breakdown of Survivor's Quest. We enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend everybody read it. This Essential Legends collection is just so awesome. I think it's a great way for people who hadn't read Legends to get involved on some of the biggest stories, and I'm happy that this story got put into an entry into it. And I don't know when I would have gotten around to this book had it not been sent to us, and I was happy that I got around to it now.
So as a Star Wars book, I was really captivated by it. I had a lot of fun spending time with these characters, especially Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade, learning all the depths and intricacies and building on what I think is valuable, these relationships and having these opposing personalities and making these discoveries about each other and how to solve problems. In the Star Wars context, it was very enthralling. As far as like a murder mystery book, so I don't put myself out as somebody who reads a lot of books, but I guess I am. I should be doing that more because I look back on it. I've read an immense amount of mystery books. Hardy Boys is one of my favorites. Lots of horror books, just all kinds of stuff, everything in between. And of course, the science fiction is the tip of my top. And, you've heard me talk a lot about the Asimov stuff. A lot of what the Asimov robot series books had to do with mysteries and whodunits and this and that. And then as far as this being a whodunit book, it's kind of mid.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, Timothy Zahn is no Agatha Christie. This is not, you're not reading Murder on the Orient Express. Like, this isn't just going to be one of the greatest mystery books you've ever read. But for a Star Wars book, it's good. And for a Star Wars mystery, it's pretty good. There's a few Star Wars mystery books out there. This one's in the top half.
Yeah. No, and so, you said it. There's really not much to belabor. It could be better in some ways. Like this, my only point is like the suspense and intrigue just wasn't there. I wanted to find out some different stuff here and there, like what happened with the survivors and all this and that. But it's like, there's no mystery surrounding Luke.
Right.
There really isn't about Mara Jade for people who know that character. There is for me because I'm not as familiar as others. But like, I think, more could have been done with these stormtroopers. More could have been done with the Chiss being, and the Jaroons. I don't know. But
I'll also say, as I said at the beginning, I think you'll get a lot out of this mystery if you don't read Outbound Flight first.
Yeah,
if you read this one first, there are some things that Outbound Flight just spoils. You won't even know what the Vagari are.
Ginsler, you have no idea what he's doing.
You're going to hear a lot about characters in this book, like Lorana. You're going to be like, who's Lorana? And then you're going to learn about her in Outbound Flight. And so there's a lot of mystery that's not mystery if you've read Outbound Flight.
Right.
And so I'd also say that. But I think your point as well. It's still not the greatest mystery ever told.
Yep.
But it's a good book, and I definitely recommend anybody pick it up. But, Colin, that wraps up the meat of the show. We now have a few more of our segments to get into. The next segment, I'm super excited about this one today. Pumped about the question. Super pumped about the question. This is our How the Force Works segment. A Patreon subscriber goes over to patreon.com/Star Wars Station and submits a question for us to answer here on the show. And today's question comes from Meatloaf. So let's dive in. All right, Colin. So today's How the Force Works question, as I said, super excited about it. The question is, out of all of the Jedi, legends, canon, new Jedi Order, old Jedi Order, who is the ideal Jedi?
Man, this is such a hard question.
That's the point. You got to answer it on air right now.
If you're pointing a gun to my head, I'm going to say Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Okay, elaborate. Why is that?
You know, so the thing that comes to mind when I think true Jedi or something like that, you start comparing them to other Jedi and who had their flaws. Well, it's not Anakin. It's I want to kind of lump Mace Windu and Yoda and some of those guys, because I understand this isn't, I haven't exactly thought this one out all the way, but you could call them the shepherds of the downfall, right? Mm-hmm. Because they were just totally oblivious to the dark side clouding them until the very last moment. And even then, I mean, like Mace Windu standing over Palpatine, and Anakin Skywalker runs in, who's totally been this red flag.
Right, he's emotionally compromised completely.
Yeah.
And Mace is aware that he's emotionally compromised.
Well, he should have been. He didn't act like it, right? And so it's not either one. And like Yoda, it seems like an insult to say that to him, about him, right? That it's not him.
Yeah, it does, but I don't think he is.
But if you ask me, it's him and Mace Windu just skipping down the path. Like, Yoda should have retired when he was 800. He shouldn't have gone for that extra pension for the 100 years or something. And then maybe Qui-Gon's a good...
Qui-Gon is my answer.
Yeah.
So I want to hear your Obi-Wan elaboration. I think that the answer of Obi-Wan is... there's not a right answer, obviously. There just can't be.
Yeah.
But the Obi-Wan justification I'm curious about.
Well, it's mainly just kind of like comparing... The biggest weakness to my answer is going to be like, well, he was Anakin's master. He let Anakin get away with so much stuff, right? But it seems to me that, like, not that Obi-Wan was infallible, because Jedi aren't infallible and all this stuff, but as the champion of the ideals, whenever it seems to me like he was challenged, like even with the Star Wars cartoon, we can't kill this guy. That would be a war crime, this and that. And Anakin steps in and does what has to be done, things like that. You know, he has these uncompromising principles, even if it's for better or worse or sometimes. And so, and the foundation of those principles are what the Jedi Order is and does from his perspective.
Right. No, I think, so Obi-Wan is a very good answer to this question. And I think that I'm going to push back on it only because we have to. We can't have the same answer. Yeah. But Obi-Wan is a really good answer. What I would say Obi-Wan is he's a true believer. He believes in the Jedi Order. He believes in the institution. He believes in its ideals. He sees the good it can do in the galaxy.
All the way to a fault.
Right? Wants to do, exactly. I think Obi-Wan is not the ideal Jedi. He is the best representation of the Order. And the distinction there is that Obi-Wan is still a byproduct of his time. He's on the council. He still plays the political games of the council. He still, listens to the Senate. He still does all of these things that are good for a prequel era Jedi, that are embraced for a prequel era Jedi. And Obi-Wan's not the greatest anything. He's very good at a lot of things, but he's not Anakin. He's not the chosen one. He's not Mace Windu or Count Dooku, these just amazing swordsmen. Like, Obi-Wan is an all-around, jack-of-all-trades Jedi. He can get the negotiation done. He can get the lightsaber fighting done. He has the Jedi philosophy down. And when you look at an argument like this, we have to look at the book we just read, Outbound Flight, where Sabaoth and Obi-Wan get into an argument about Jedi philosophy and the interpretation of the code. And while we know that Sabaoth is wrong, the existence of the debate presupposes that there is more debate among other Jedi who are not bad, like Sabaoth, and so there's not exactly a right answer, but Obi-Wan fits the mold of a prequel-era Jedi perfectly.
Right.
And so he's a great representation of the Order. There is this stupendous description of Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, and so I got to bring that up because this is, I think, the reason you're going to say he's the ideal Jedi, and it's not a bad reason at all. The excerpt says, "This is Obi-Wan Kenobi. A phenomenal pilot who doesn't like to fly, a devastating warrior who'd rather not fight, a negotiator without peer who frankly prefers to sit alone in a quiet cave and meditate. Jedi Master, General in the Grand Army of the Republic, member of the Jedi Council, and yet inside he feels like he's none of these things. Inside he still feels like a Padawan."
Yeah, that's good.
It's a really, really apt description of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I think that that's why a lot of people, including you, would say he's an ideal Jedi, and it's not a wrong answer, because I think that there's absolutely the argument to be made for Obi-Wan in that context. But my answer is Qui-Gon Jinn, because I think if you go back to the first Jedi, in Legends, the Dai Bendu, but in canon, whenever James Mangold's movie comes out, I'll bet you that Jedi is almost identical to Qui-Gon Jinn in the most important ways.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Qui-Gon is in it for the Force. Qui-Gon's not in it for the Jedi Order. He cares about the Jedi Order. He sees the good the Jedi Order can do. It's not like he walks away from it ever. But Qui-Gon is a steward of the light side of the Force, and he understands what it means to listen to the Force, to be in tune with the Force, when all of the Jedi around him have lost a certain part of that, have lost a little aspect of that. And so when you see Qui-Gon disobeying the Order, or the Council, when you see Qui-Gon forging his own path, it's because he knows that this is what a Jedi would do. A Jedi is not a person who listens to the Jedi Council. That's not the definition of a Jedi. A Jedi is a guardian of peace and justice in the Old Republic, and that is exactly what Qui-Gon did at all points, regardless of what the Senate said, regardless of what the Jedi Council said, where Obi-Wan may not. Obi-Wan may not go somewhere that he wasn't sent by the Jedi Council. He does sometimes, but usually only when Anakin does, and when he's got to follow Anakin there. And so I would say that Qui-Gon Jinn is the ideal Jedi.
Yeah. Again, I don't think it's two sides of a double-headed coin.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And is it any coincidence that they were master and apprentice? Yeah, probably not.
That's a fun question.
Yeah, it was a great question. Thank you very much, Loaf, for asking that question. We appreciate it. And if you'd like to ask a question, all you got to do is head on over to patreon.com/Star Wars Station and submit your question, and we'll answer it here on the show. Colin, our next segment is the HoloNet news segment, and we got a few news stories to talk about, so let's hop right into it.
You made the HoloNet.
Another day and another Dave Filoni interview about Ahsoka. I feel like just since the strike has been over, we're just getting a deluge of Filoni interviews. He gave an interview to Empire Magazine recently where he talked about the thoughts for the future of Thrawn, and thoughts where all of these characters are going. It's apt. We're going to be talking about this in a Survivor's Quest book, but in this article, he really alluded to a couple really cool things. He alluded to a team up with Captain Pelion. He goes so far, he's like, I'd really like to see these two characters interact. Like, he's not the guy steering the ship. Like, he's not the man making those decisions. So that's just saying we're going to get that. And everyone knew. I mean, we need the Watson to the Holmes. Without that, who is Thrawn?
Yeah, and I'm really excited about the pitting Thrawn versus Hera. We saw her in Home One, and what's his name? General Akbar just sat there.
Right. Well,
so we know who's going to be in charge here.
You're right.
And that's fine. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, you see, in the article, he says that we're going to see a Thrawn versus Hera rematch. That Hera is Thrawn's foil. And that's not really something that I ever thought. It didn't really, when I was watching Rebels, it kind of felt like the team was his foil. There wasn't an individual. I mean, if you made me say an individual, I probably would have said Ezra because of the end. But before the very end, his foil really is Hera. I mean, it is the admiral versus the general. It's the general of the rebellion and the Admiral of the Empire. Like, it's these two tactical minds against each other. And so she makes a little bit more of a compelling foil, I think. And, she sat on the sidelines for a lot of Ahsoka. She obviously didn't go to Peridia with Ahsoka and Sabine. And so it'll be interesting now that Thrawn's in the galaxy, getting to see Hera be the one that wrestles with Thrawn.
Yeah, it's going to be enthralling, to say the least.
Yeah. It's gonna be a good time. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. And I'm hoping it's in a TV show. I hope we're getting a season 2. We don't know yet. Still no confirmation on that, whether it's in the movie or a season 2, but I hope it's Ahsoka season 2. I just think we need some more setup for a movie. I don't think we're ready for a movie to come out of what we got in Ahsoka yet. The other article, though there's a few other articles, but the next article we got to talk about is we recently got an update and a new press release from Disney confirming that we are going to be of all of the Disney Plus 2024 shows. So we got a couple weeks ago a Disney Plus UK tweet and press release that showed what was coming, and we were a little nervous because Bad Batch and Tales of the Jedi weren't on there. But that's just because that was actually new things coming out. And since it's a season 2 for Tales of the Jedi and a season 3 for the Bad Batch, that was why it was omitted from the Disney Plus UK. But rest assured, we now have confirmation from this press release that we'll be getting the Bad Batch Season 3, Tales of the Jedi Season 2, both in 2024. We're going to be getting, obviously, the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew. And we know that Andor has been pushed to 25.
Yeah, and so right now, all that's on the table for 2024 is Bad Batch Season 3 and Tales of the Jedi. All the other stuff has been moved to 2025.
No. Acolyte and Skeleton Crew are also 24. Acolyte and Skeleton Crew are also 24. There's a semicolon in the title right there.
There we go. Well, Skeleton Crew's all the way at the end, right?
Right. Well,
and so is Acolyte going to be in the spring?
I'd like to hear so you don't have to give me dates or guesses, but what's the order that these 4 are going to release in?
Bad Batch, Tales of the Jedi right along with the Acolyte. And then, like in the May timeframe. And then after that is Skeleton Crew.
Okay. See, I agree with you completely. I think we're going to get the Bad Batch soon. That's my hope. Crossing my fingers, it's a February, March thing, and that we're going to have a lot to talk about real soon. And then there's been rumors swirling around that the Acolyte may start in late April. And so if that's the case, I think you're absolutely right. We'll be getting the Acolyte, and then in the midst of the Acolyte, on May 4th, we'll get Tales of the Jedi, is my guess.
Right.
And then finally, we'll round out the year, the holiday season with Skeleton Crew, which is all cool, except that means completely dry for the whole summertime. I mean, we're just not going to be getting anything over the summertime.
Yeah, which, as is the case, it's too hot to be doing stuff, right? I don't know.
I mean,
I'd rather go to Disney World and Disneyland. Than...
Yeah, I mean, I spend summer outside, and so you don't have to be watching TV inside. But if we get the Acolyte late April, let's be generous and say it's Andor style and it's 12 episodes. We have no idea, but let's just guess that it's 12 episodes. That puts it ending in mid-June, late June?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, okay, well, no, that puts its ending in July, mid-July, which isn't bad, because then you got mid-July. There is a little bit of a drought from mid-July to November, maybe October. If Skeleton Crew kicked around October, I think that would be the perfect timing. But we know from experience that they don't really try to stagger animation and live action, that Disney perceives these as different audiences. I would agree with them. It is different audiences. I mean, if you're watching Star Wars animation, you're a bigger diehard fan than if you're watching any of the live action stuff. I mean, people who watch Bad Batch are more diehard than people who watch Andor. That just is the case because a lot of people are too averse to watch animated. And so we'll see if there's overlap or anything like that. But I'm really excited. Like we said at the top of the show, 24 is going to be a good year. I'm excited about 24.
It really is going to be good.
Speaking of the Acolyte, our next news story covers the fact that the Acolyte had reshoots in December. They sat down and did principal photography, or after 6 months after principal photography, they did reshoots. And from all indications, these were like planned reshoots. These weren't something as a result of the strike or, oh no, they got to change something about the show last minute. This is just a natural process for filmmaking. They put everything together and then they say, we got to tweak that a little bit. This doesn't sound right. This doesn't look right. And so they get them back in the set and they do it again.
Yeah, it looks, if you dig into the meat of the article, it talks about reshooting a lightsaber duel in a forest setting. So, lightsaber duels are especially, there were some positive lightsaber duels in Ahsoka and some negative ones that people didn't perceive as the best, maybe. So maybe they got some feedback on this and they want to make these things look better. It could be just as simple as that.
Do you think that someone gets stabbed in the gut and survives in the Acolyte and they're like, we can't do that. Can't do it again.
I'm going to laugh if it, well,
we'll never know because the reshoot.
It's either somebody gets stabbed in the gut or a hand gets cut off.
I would welcome a hand getting cut off. What's the last hand that got cut off? Anakin's in Revenge of the Sith?
I don't know.
I think that's the last hand that got cut off, which is so lame. Look, if you're listening to this and you're like, you guys are totally wrong, someone got a hand cut off last week, let us know. I think the last hand that got cut off was Anakin's in Revenge of the Sith, which is, I still think it's a total shame that no hands got cut off in the sequels. They totally should have.
Nobody in Rogue One.
No one in Rogue One. No one in Solo. The lightsabers in those are at the very end for a couple seconds.
Well,
but I know there's none in the sequels because I complain about it all the time. We got someone getting cut in half. Snoke gets cut in half in the sequels. But no hands. We need more hands. Cut more hands off.
And in all the TV shows, they've been really careful about. They're just slashes off screen, or if it's a faceless stormtrooper, the fence cuts him in half, right?
Right. So the Kenobi stuff was gruesome. Maybe there was a hand cut off in Kenobi, or they just took it to the next level and did everything else. Our final news story I wanted to end. I thought this was just a cool note. Han Solo's blaster, his DL-44, the official prop, has been sold at auction. It sold for $1,057,500. And Colin, I'm super excited for your Star Wars moment of the week because that's what it is. You bought it, right? That's
oh my! Yeah, I'm eating dirt for the rest of my life. I wish.
But at least you have the DL-44.
If I had money to burn, I'd have spent that much on it for sure. Gosh, that's crazy. So that DL-44 is based off the broom handle Mauser, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would be insane. I guess when they were making this movie, this was what, 1977? So long ago, and maybe these things weren't the relic they are today. But if you took an authentic broom handle Mauser and converted it into one of these, that would be sacrilege to to the history, I guess. But if you want one of these, I'm sure there's some props out there, but if you want to convert one, I'm sure you can buy an airsoft gun that looks like this and convert it as you please. But doing it to original, for one, it's not going to be worth $1 million, but for two, it's just not going to be the same. But man, it'd be cool to own such a thing, wouldn't it?
It would. It absolutely would. I just thought it was neat. Anytime those Star Wars props get sold for big bucks, I'm always interested in that.
I remember seeing the original lightsabers, like Anakin's lightsaber and this and that. They sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, well, they got that piece off of a camera, and the camera is also a valuable collectible for photography nerds. And so you always get, I think it's called a Graflex. It is called a Graflex. Yeah. And you have Star Wars people trying to collect it for the lightsaber, and then you have photography people trying to collect it for the camera. And it's, I think there's a heated discussion among the two communities about what the purpose of this camera should be. But Colin, that wraps up our news segment. We've only got one more segment left, and we're going to roll straight into it, and that is our Star Wars moment of the week.
We would be honored if you would join us.
All right, Colin, what is your Star Wars moment of the week?
So mine is a personal one in a sense. Carter, you were there. We did a gender reveal. I'm having another kid.
I know.
It's a boy.
Congratulations. That's so wonderful.
So yeah, it's very wonderful. That's understatement. I'm excited. My wife's excited. My kids are excited. And there's a lot that comes with that. And the biggest thing for me is kind of whining about it. I'm having to give up my man cave.
Right.
So I have all my lightsabers, a lot of, I'm not a huge memorabilia collector or anything. I have the trinkets I like here and there, like the cups and glasses from the cantina at Disney World and Mando's helmet, this and that, a bunch of Star Wars Legos. I'm having to pack all that away
to
make room for my kid. And I guess a selfish side of me is kind of sad I'm having to move it, but the optimistic side of me, I get to make this custom space for my new child.
Yep.
And I can set it up elsewhere in a new revitalized space.
Right.
So it's a win-win when you get right down to it.
Every time I do any move and I'm moving all my Star Wars stuff, it's obviously it's like, you're moving. But when you get to like revisit those things, you're like, this is so cool. It sits on my shelf all the time. I see it all the time and it's in the same spot. And so you eventually just like glaze over it. Right. But then when you're holding it and putting it in a box, you're like, man, this thing is awesome. Like, this is so cool that I've got this.
It really is. And so I'm feeling all of that. It's fun.
Yeah, that's good. That's real good. So my Star Wars moment of the week are the moments of the week that I live for. Like, these are always the best moments of the week when something like this happens. So it's 2 days before Christmas, and we're in Walmart, which is the last place.
Who's we?
Me and my wife.
Okay.
Is the last place that I want to be 2 days before Christmas.
Like a nightmare.
It is. Yeah, it's terrible. I don't even remember what we're doing there. I just know I'm miserable. I just know that I don't want to be there, and it sucks. But this happens to me and immediately brightens my mood and makes the rest of the Walmart trip totally worth it. And I saw two, 8-year-old kids having a lightsaber fight in the middle of an aisle, in the toy aisle.
Yeah.
And anytime you get to see Star Wars bringing joy to people out in the wild, and especially kids, it is always awesome. Because people will say things like, Star Wars is dead, or kids don't care about Star Wars anymore, or yada yada. But when you see something like that, it's always uplifting. As a Star Wars fan, you're always like, they're going to be okay. They're still going to love Star Wars. And so I was very happy to get to see the lightsaber fight between these two random strangers.
Yeah, that's amazing. I read the text in your notes. I thought you and your wife had a lightsaber fight. I was waiting to hear the details.
No, not this time. We just got to see one. I think if we had a lightsaber fight, she would absolutely try to hit me with it like it was a baseball bat. So I'd be scared to lightsaber fight Cassidy.
Oh, that's awesome though to see that.
Yeah, it was. Really cool. It was really nice. It was really cool. But that's the end of the show. I'm glad we can end it on such a cool note. But that is the end of this episode. That's the last Star Wars Station episode of 2023. And what a banger it was, because we got to talk about Survivor's Quest. We're ending on a high note, and you all got to learn about Colin's new kid.
Yeah.
So what an end.
And books are fun. You need to pick up more books, and the quality with which the audiobooks are delivered are second to none. And I listen to a lot of audiobooks. Well,
and we know that we're going to be getting two early in the new year next year. We're going to be getting The Living Force by John Jackson Miller.
Yeah.
And we're going to be getting the new book about Mace Windu, and I can't remember what the title is right at this moment, but it's written by Stephen Barnes, and so it's going to be really good. I'm very excited. Those are the first two books that we're going to be getting in the new year, and they're going to be a blast for us to read. So,
yeah, and there's more High Republic stuff
down
the pipe for sure.
More High Republic. We're going to be covering a lot next year, and we hope you guys are along for that ride. Until then, there's all kinds of ways that you guys can connect with us. You can connect with us on Facebook, Star Wars Station. We have a Facebook group, Star Wars Station Cantina. We've got a Discord. You can find that link in the bio of this podcast. We've got a Twitter and an Instagram. Our Twitter is SW_Station, and our Instagram is StarWars.Station. You know, we're rarely on Twitch, but it exists. Go drop us a follow there at twitch.tv/stationmedia. And guys, just give us a like, give us a subscription. We love the engagement. We love hanging out with our fans, talking to our fans. We would love for you guys to continue to be a part of this community. If you can leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple, this helps us a ton. It gets us in more people's ears. So please do that. Tell your friends. You're going to be celebrating the new year with folks. Maybe you're going to be talking about Star Wars and bring up the Star Wars Station podcast. And, like we've already mentioned, don't forget about our Patreon, patreon.com/Star Wars Station. We got all kinds of tiers there, starting at $1. So you can go check that out. And we have an awesome website where you can find all things Star Wars Station, and that's StarWarsStationPodcast.com.
Yeah.
Not .net, not .gov.com.
Yeah, we're lucky to get a hold of that one. We tried StarWarsStation.com, and good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah, good luck with that. Well, the podcast part was still a good compromise. I'm glad that we came to that conclusion.
Yeah, well, we suffered over that one, and it just hit me.
Yeah,
So
we agonized over sushi. We were sitting there designing the website at our sushi restaurant, and we're like, what are we going to do?
Yeah. So we got that figured out. Big Warhammer stuff on the horizon. You know, that game is ever evolving, and if you care about that at all, check out its Instagram page. That thing is blowing up. I think I got 50 notifications about people following. You need to be the next follower.
Absolutely. And
Right,
that's Warhammer.station.
Warhammer.station. And then we got all the subsequent socials to do with that, and warhammerstation.com. Terrain. I mean, I'm this close to getting Terrain in packaging to sell online.
Yep.
It's a labor of love. You know, it's one thing to come up with a cool product. It's a whole other aspect to come with the manufacturing end of it. It's climbing Mount Everest almost. It's a scale model Mount Everest in this case.
Well, I'm looking forward to all of that.
Carter, you played on that terrain.
I have played on that terrain. It's
fantastic.
very good. It's great terrain, and so I'm super excited. And I'm happy that this has been growing. So,
but the Warhammer stuff is fun. Check that out.
absolutely. And guys, please keep listening. But until next year, all you got to do is one thing, and that one thing is stay wizard.